Thanks for coming to, so this is for Zoom too. What installation number is this of our Understanding Technology series? Maybe like 4 or 5? Five, yeah. Thanks for coming to the 5th installment of our Understanding Technology series with Jackson Hole Computer Clinic and Craig Tiso, or Greg, is it Greg Tiso? And he was born in Cooperstown, New York, and lived there until his sophomore year in high school when he moved to Jackson and attended the Jackson Hole Community School. During college, Jack took a temporary job working at the Jackson Hole Computer Clinic that turned into a permanent job with the onset of COVID. Finishing his last college semester online, Jack trained to become one of the technicians at Jackson Hole Computer Clinic and is now the head technician and manager. He works with people to fix their computer issues and other electronic problems. And he has generously donated his time and suggested all of these topics for us to learn. And if you have any suggestions of things you want to learn about fixing your computers, please let us know. And without further ado, I'll let Jack take over.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jack. We're going to be talking today about Windows 10's end of support, or you'll often hear it called end of life. That's happening on October 14th. So one moment, I gotta. There we go. So on October 14th, we have Windows 10's end of life. What's actually going to stop on October 14th is four main things. We have our technical support for Windows 10. So if you have an issue, or if anyone is having an issue with an application on Windows 10, it's no longer going to be something that Microsoft is looking into helping you fix or helping you get to work. Second thing is you're not going to get any more software updates. So Microsoft isn't going to be putting out any new features, any new updates for things like Microsoft Edge on Windows 10 or the settings. It's going to be the way that it is from this point forward. Finally, the one that's really actually important is going to be the security updates. So security updates and fixes are going to stop. What this means is if anyone finds an issue with Windows 10, a vulnerability or a way to exploit it to get to people, Microsoft isn't going to fix this anymore. You won't get any further updates. So if a new vulnerability comes out, usually Microsoft would put out a security update, would update the software and prevent that problem from causing any issues. That's going to stop happening on October 14th. Now, oftentimes what people say next is, what happens if I just keep using Windows 10? And frankly, not much. You're not going to have an immediate issue. It's like if tomorrow you decided to stop doing all the maintenance on your car, the next day, nothing's really going to happen. What's going to start having problems is over time, you're going to run into situations where software that you're trying to run or applications that you're trying to download might ask you to have a newer version of like Windows 11, and instead you won't be able to download or use that application. It's going to be the same situation with new features. So if Microsoft announces, a lot of their current announcements have been AI focused with programs like Copilot, that's not going to be applied to Windows 10, only Windows 11. So if they're coming out with new features that you want to use, you won't be able to do that on Windows 10. And again, the most important aspect of this is going to be the security. With no more security updates going out, as time goes on, your computer is going to get less and less secure. It's not going to happen immediately, but as the months pass, and we can't really predict it because it comes down to when vulnerabilities are found or when someone makes a virus or malware for Windows 10. When those events do eventually occur, Microsoft isn't going to fix the problem. So it's not going to happen immediately, but over time, Windows 10 will become less and less secure. If you are still using Windows 10 after the end of support, I highly recommend that you don't use it online. for anything that's like banking, email, Facebook, anything with an account or personal information. If all you're doing is using Windows 10 offline, then there's no issue. You can keep using it as long as you'd like. But if you are going to use it online, don't use it. If you're just Googling something or using it as a stationary YouTube player, that's perfectly fine. But anything that has your personal information or an account or your banking information, you should avoid using after the end of life. There is an exception to this. Microsoft has long had the extended security update program. They had it with Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows XP. Basically, when businesses use Microsoft, they don't always want to have to, at the end of life, they might not be ready to change operating systems. So what this program does is it lets them pay for extended security updates. For the first time with Windows 11, they're extending that to a consumer program as well. So with this program, you can get 1 extra year of Microsoft's security updates for Windows 10. It's only going to be for 1 year, and you do have to pay for it, and you also have to qualify for it. This program does not give you technical support. It does not give you software updates or feature updates. It is only giving you those security updates, but those are the most important aspect. So if you want to use this program, there's a couple of things you need to make sure. You have to make sure your computer can go to the latest version of Windows 10. And that's going to be 22H2 when October hits. If your computer can go to 22H2 or is currently on 22H2, then you can enroll in this program. For some of the really old computers that can't update to 22H2's version of Windows 10, then this program you just won't be able to use. So if you can go to the latest version of Windows 10 and you're signed into a Microsoft account, you will have to be signed into an active Microsoft account. So some people who like to keep Microsoft and OneDrive and all of that off of their computer, you would have to add that to your computer to use this program. With those two, you can then apply for it and you will have to pay. There's 3 ways of paying. You can either give Microsoft access to your settings and information on the computer. They'll use that for maybe AI training or for advertisement purposes. But that's one way, is you can give them, they're not going to be able to see your personal information like your documents. They're not going to be able to see the websites or passwords that you're entering, but they will be able to see kind of what you're doing on the computer, how you have it set up, how often you use it, things along those lines. The second is if you work with Microsoft's rewards program and you have 1,000 of their rewards points, you can use that. And the third is $30 US. So if you're at the end of Windows 10 and you really don't want to upgrade to Windows 11, you just need 1 more year, this is a good option to look into. We would definitely recommend that you use the $30 US option for privacy purposes. We do not advise that you sign up for Microsoft's sharing settings and information option, just for privacy. Good call. Now, if you do want to upgrade to Windows 11, this is the requirements. You have to have a UEFI with Secure Boot on your BIOS on your motherboard. You have to have TPM 2.0 enabled on your in your BIOS, and it has to be on your. It's a physical chip, so it has to be on your motherboard. And you have to have a supported CPU. Those 3 things are required to go to Windows 11. There are some ways of bypassing those. We don't advise them because they will have other issues, and you will likely have to continue to tinker with them and work with them as time goes on to keep the computer running well. So unless you really want to get into tinkering with your computer, I wouldn't advise looking up any ways of bypassing the security requirements for going to Windows 11. If you have a supported CPU, so a Ryzen 2000 series or newer, or an Intel 8th gen or newer, if you have one of those, then you likely have the other 2 requirements on this board. That's not always the case though. And by default, if your computer's older than about 5 years, they may be turned off by default in your BIOS. So TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot You might need to go into your BIOS or get someone to help you go into your BIOS and turn those features on before you can go to Windows 11. Any computer that you've, yes. So the BIOS is the first layer of software that turns on your computer and loads your operating system. Most computers and laptops will have a key that you can press during startup to load into the BIOS. It's usually F2 or F1 or the delete key. The easiest way to figure out which one for you is to just Google it. Look up your model and ask how to get to the BIOS. Once you're in the BIOS, you can change a lot of the base level settings of your computer that initializes your computer. It's the first layer of software that turns everything on basically and loads your operating system. So I would just Google it if you're trying to find, because it's going to be different per computer. If you do not have a TPM 2.0 chip on your motherboard, you're not going to be able to add it. So that is something that if it's not on your motherboard, you just need a new computer. Same thing with the CPUs. If you don't have the right CPU and it's a laptop, you're not going to be able to change that. With a desktop, you can get a new motherboard or you can get a new CPU and then make your computer compatible. With a laptop, you're just looking at an entirely new computer. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like Windows 11. It has been out since 2021. That's when it launched. It's been out for about 4 years. When it first launched, it has only this year surpassed in the past 4 years overall users versus Windows 10. And for a while there, when Windows 11 first came out, it actually surpassed users for Windows 10. And then people went back to Windows 10 and Windows 10 gained ground on it again. So there have been a lot of people out there, if you talk to anyone, they'll say that they don't like Windows 11 or they have a lot of issues with the Windows 11. So I just wanted to briefly talk about why people commonly don't like Windows 11. It has hardware requirements. It's pretty much the first time that Windows has required certain hardware to run their operating system. In the past, hardware, if you didn't have the right hardware, certain things might not have worked. Now, if you don't have the security features that they want or the CPUs that are supported, they will actively block you from installing Windows 11. So it's a new, it's for security purposes. They want to have hardware level security in the computers now, but it does mean that it's the first Microsoft Windows operating system that really has hardware requirements in order to install and run it that have to be validated by Microsoft. There's a lot of features that weren't kind of dropped when Windows 11 launched. I'll just give you some examples. If you think about the taskbar at the bottom of your computer, in previous versions of Windows, you could put it on the bottom, you could put it on the side, the top, wherever you kind of wanted along the edge. In Windows 11, it's at the bottom, and that's the only option. So little things like that have been removed. And people who liked having their sidebar on the right-hand side in Windows 10 upgrade to Windows 11 and they find out they have to have it at the bottom. You know, that's one of the things that people really didn't like. Some of those features have been added back. An example would be their file backup system. Basically, it's a system where you plug in an external hard drive and it backs up your files to that hard drive automatically on a daily, weekly, or whatever basis you set it. That wasn't there when Windows 11 first launched. They really want people to use OneDrive and their paid services, so they had removed it. They have since, in the 4 years, added that back to Windows 11. So a lot of those features that were removed have been added back. But there are still features that people have gotten used to that are just non-existent in Windows 11. A lot of the features of the control panel are being moved to the settings panel. That's being changed up. So people are frustrated because they've been used to doing it one way, or they've been used to a certain functionality that Windows used to have that it just doesn't have anymore. The user interface has also changed. If you look at Windows 11, you'll notice that the edges of the windows are curved now instead of being square. Little things like that also can make people kind of upset because it's not gonna look exactly the same. And they've moved the start menu from the left-hand side to the middle. They have added back the option to move it back to the left. But again, it's a different look, it's a different feel. Most of the computer is gonna act exactly the same way. You go to your file explorer, you can navigate the same way, but there are gonna be differences in the way it looks and the way it interacts with you. There are more apps and bundled apps. If you install Windows 11 and you open up the start menu and you notice that you have Spotify or LinkedIn or Facebook links right there, those are being added by Microsoft. You can uninstall them and remove them, but they are being automatically added to a lot of these installations of Windows 11. And it's not always going to be the same. Every time you install, a different number of apps might be added automatically to that start menu. They've also been having more advertisements popping up for Microsoft products within the start menu or to the side in the notification panel. This has been increasing over what it was in Windows 10. It wasn't non-existent in Windows 10, but it did increase, and people have been a little upset about that as well. And then finally, when it first launched, it did have a number of bugs, and it was actually slower than Windows 10, mainly because of background tasks. A lot of that has been fixed in the last 4 years, and they're going to continue to work on it and iterate and make it better. But if someone is saying that Windows 11 is just naturally slower, they're not completely wrong, but I would say at this point, it's probably equal. You're not going to really notice a reduction in speed, and if you are, there's something wrong. It does require more system resources though, so if you're putting Windows 11 on a much older computer, it will feel slower merely because it requires more processing power to run, and Windows 11 does than Windows 10 did. Now, this isn't the first time that Microsoft has had this. They had this with Windows 8. It was definitely not a popular operating system, and they didn't keep it around very long. They went to Windows 10 pretty quickly. They've also had it when they first launched Windows like XP and Vista. Very often when they launch a new operating system, features change, the way you interact with it changes. So it's not new that the operating system launches in this state where people kind of don't like it and take a long time to migrate over to it. And at the end, when they're forcing you over, people are kind of upset. It's not the first time that's happened. So don't expect that it's kind of an outlier there. Now, there are other options. If you're on Windows 10 and you can't go to Windows 11 or you don't want to go to Windows 11, you can put a different operating system on your computer. Now, Linux is going to be the third option really that's out there. There are other operating systems, but none of them are going to be very popular or large. You have Mac OS, which is Apple exclusive. You can only put that on Apple devices. You have Windows, and then you have Linux. Linux is open source, so that means that you don't have to pay anyone to use it, and anyone can contribute to making it better if they want to go out and do that. Now, people often don't understand what Linux is, and Linux is just the kernel, kind of the engine of the computer. Windows also has a kernel, and Mac OS also has a kernel. And that's why Windows has such great backwards compatibility, because the core of their operating system doesn't really change iteration to iteration. So what Linux is it's an open source kernel that people build operating systems off of. So the operating system, if you hear Linux Ubuntu or Linux Mint, Mint is the operating system that is built on top of the Linux kernel, which is the core, how the operating system works. So that's the differential there. Linux is just the name of the type of kernel. And then there's going to be a lot, since it's open source, there are a lot, hundreds, I haven't looked it up, but probably thousands of Linux distros. This is an example of Linux Mint. This would be what Linux Mint would look like if you put it on and used it as your desktop. So it's often regarded as the easiest one to use if you're a Windows user, because it's going to have a similar features such as your file system there, a start menu, a settings button, things like that are gonna be in Linux Mint. So it's gonna be similar to Windows in certain user interface regards. So oftentimes, if you're gonna try Linux, because each distro is gonna be different, Linux Mint is one that is recommended. Other ones that are gonna be very common is Ubuntu or Kubuntu. Mint is actually an offshoot of Ubuntu. Same, so if you're looking into Linux, I'd recommend watching some YouTube videos, see how they operate, but there's no reason you can't try Linux. There is no requirement to put Linux on your computer, so you can put it on any computer that you want.
How do you, hey, sorry.
Yeah.
If you wanted to try Linux though, and you're on like a 10 system, can you switch back and forth or like,
So
I mean, if you decide to do one, can you go back and be like, I just have to do 11 or?
yeah, you can. You can dual boot if you wanted to. So that's where you can have, you can partition your hard drive and then choose which operating system to boot into when you turn the computer on. So that's your first option. You can always install Linux, decide you don't like it, and then install Windows back. That's perfectly fine as well. Or you can use a virtual machine. So if you wanted to get a virtual machine and install it on Linux, you could then install Windows within that virtual machine. If you had a specific program you needed to use, there are a lot of downsides to using Linux. It's a much smaller user market, so the help that you're going to find online for it is smaller. If you look at its user market, I think it depends on what you're looking at, but let's just say desktops. I think it has gotten as high as maybe like 2% of the market there. And it has grown, and if you take in all the markets, it's higher than that. But the fact of the matter is Windows and Mac OS are definitely the market leaders here. So if you're looking for help with an issue that you're doing on Linux, there's no official company you can call and ask for help, and there's less support online. Now, the people who build this, again, it's open source, so different people can all contribute to the Mint project, and they can donate to it and to host things and whatnot. Those people are definitely enthusiastic, and so there are definitely people out there that are answering questions and helping people work through their use of Linux, but it's just a much smaller number than you get if you're dealing with Windows, merely because of its user base. The second issue is compatibility. Again, it's a much smaller community. So certain things like if you wanted to use Microsoft Word and Outlook and you wanted those programs, they're not going to be by default compatible with Linux.
Things like Photoshop. That online.
Again, yes, you would have to see if they have a Linux version. If it's supported, it might behave a little differently. And a lot of companies just aren't going to have a Linux version, and you won't be able to use that program on Linux.
But you can like use a browser that Firefox.
If it's web-based, you can do anything you want on
And
Linux.
it's secure, like.
Yep, so it gets security updates. As long as you're using a distro that is still active. So there are so many, and basically anyone can make one. There's a Linux Hannah Montana operating system out there that someone made back when that was really popular. That's certainly not getting software security updates anymore. So that wouldn't be one that you would want to use. But it was also probably never made as a legitimate operating system. It was more of a joke.
Download it.
Yep, you just download it from the internet. You'll have to like any other operating system, you'll have to create an installation media onto like a flash drive, boot to that flash drive, and then you can install it onto your computer. But there are instructions out there and programs that'll help you do that. And if you go to the website of any of these distros, you will see instructions on how to install for any of the popular ones, the larger communities. So Linux is definitely an option. It's a secure option. It does have the downsides of less support and less compatibility, but if those don't matter to you, and it is a different operating system, so you do have to learn how to use it. It's not gonna be Windows, it's not gonna be Mac OS. It's an entirely new kernel, core way of operating. But if you are interested in those are definitely options, and they're good options. And if you do everything web-based, then it's actually a really great option, because that your experience navigating the internet is going to be the same. Once you download Google Chrome or Firefox, then you'll be using Google Chrome or Firefox.
Is there like, you know how to download Windows 11, you have to have a certain amount of CPM and stuff like that. Is there a certain?
So there's,
Take that?
yeah, there's no requirement. Now, if you try to install Linux onto hardware that it doesn't have drivers for, it's not supported. Certain things might not work, or the install might not quite work, but that you'd have to get pretty old before you run into that. Pretty much any hardware out there that you're going to have will run Linux perfectly fine.
What's,
So if you have a machine that's that can run, let's say Windows 7, then you can definitely run Linux. And if you have anything older than Windows 7, then you might run into issues or might need to check. So if yeah, you can also put Linux onto Mac, as long as it's not one of their new Mac M1 chip, M2 chips. They don't currently have the drivers to run on Apple's new chips, but any of the chips that are older than 2019 on a Mac, again, Apple does their support about 8 to 10 years. So if your computer is older than 8 to 10 years, you won't be able to update to the newest operating system for Apple, and you might get outdated there. And in that regard, you might want to think about going to something like Linux. So you could definitely install this on Apple computers as well, that can't update for Apple. Or if you want to have an Apple computer and just run Linux, but yeah. As long as it's not newer than 2020, because right now they can't run on the new Apple chips.
are they gonna create one that will?
There's probably someone working on it. Again, it's not a company, so it just comes down to someone out there deciding to figure that out. And Apple is certainly not out there contributing by helping. So, there'd be a lot of reverse engineering to figure that out. Yeah. All right. Are there any questions that you have about end of life of Windows 10 or?
I guess the biggest
Specific
problem that I'm
examples?
seeing, and I guess we kind of hit on it, is that my dad has like one computer that he has some of his banking stuff on and check printing things and drivers and things that he's had problems that he can't go to Windows 8 or whatever. I don't know what is on his computer at this point, on his other computer. And he's like, I have to have this computer. This computer is like 10 years old. I can't update this computer. It has all my programs on it. And I guess for him, I'm like, well, what do you do when this happens? Should he pay the $30? I don't know that Linux, I don't know if it's even Windows 7. I have no idea. I'll have to talk to him about it, but I don't
If it's
know.
an older OS like Windows 7, as long as he's not doing a lot online, if he
I think it's just
uses
the program.
if he uses a different computer to access his like online banking or things like that, it should be perfectly fine to use an older OS. The difficulty is, again, if it breaks down. You might have different, yeah, newer hardware. So when you create an operating system, you have to create drivers. The manufacturers have to create drivers for things to work, like your trackpad, your speakers. In the Windows 7 era, you had to go out, if you were installing and you didn't buy a computer with it pre-installed, the operating system, you were installing yourself, you had to go out and get things like your Wi-Fi driver, and your trackpad driver, or if you didn't have trackpad, your mouse drivers, and you had to install those onto the computer before those would function. Nowadays, Windows has, and most other operating systems, have built-in basic drivers, so that when you first install the operating system, the monitor will work, you'll have graphics drivers, your trackpad or mouse will work, and then you can connect to the internet and it will download the specific drivers for your hardware. When you're dealing with older hardware, it's unlikely it's extremely rare that the manufacturer of the computer from 10 years ago will release drivers for the operating system of today. And vice versa. So when you're dealing with really old hardware, when you're trying to, let's say, install Windows 7 on a machine that came out this year, certain features are just not going to work because there's not a driver for Windows 7 for that machine. So oftentimes what you have to do is use a virtual machine. You use a virtual machine operating system program like a virtual box, which is free to use if you're not using it for a commercial purpose. Which is most of these programs are free to use if you don't use them for a commercial purpose. So if you download, let's say, VirtualBox and you install Windows 7, then you can put the programs that only run on Windows 7 onto that. But again, you'll need to have the installation media. So whether that's a download or a CD or a
Well, I
flash
think
drive.
that's part of the problem is that one of the companies went out of business or something, and you can't get the drivers, and
Yeah.
there's a whole like.
So in situations like that, if you had to run it on new hardware, you'd have to find someone out there who has the installation media, who archived it or something on the internet, and you'd have to get the operating system working again. You can either do that by getting a computer of the same age and putting the OS back on there, or you can get a newer computer and run it like a virtual machine. Would be your options there. But yeah, if it's a program, Windows has very good forward and backward compatibility. It's one of the things they do really well. But if the program is making multiple operating system jumps, it often doesn't run anymore, or certain features don't run in it. So that can be a difficult situation.
I know it's going to be a difficult situation for him, I'm just trying to.
And eventually
He's
he's gonna have to find a different software or program that'll do what he wants. Or
Well,
if
he
it-
has a new computer, it's just that he's tied to this other one.
no, absolutely. Anyone else have any questions?
Is it best to use that, you want to, that to boot up by loader that once you told me to a couple months ago? I loaded it on some drive and now I've been getting, put it on, didn't understand how to get it on the computer to boot.
Yeah.
Now I can see if you go within it, it's on your page, you can just open it there.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so it sounds like you got the Ubuntu on the USB drive, but you haven't gotten installed onto the computer, is that right? So a lot of those operating systems will run off of the USB drive as you can try it out and see if you like it type situation. So usually you might be in a situation where you have you're doing the live version of Ubuntu and it's running off of the flash drive versus installing it to the computer. But if you ever need help with that, we can always, if you bring your computer or anything by, we can always show you and look through that with you. But if it's actually a great option. If you just want to see how it operates, you can install them onto the flash drive and run them off the flash drive and see if that's going to be an operating system that you like without committing to fully installing it. When you fully install the operating system, you do either have to have a blank partition or you have to delete the old information off of the disk that you're putting it on. So you'll want to back that up. If you're going to a new computer or a new operating system, there are a couple of ways of transferring information. Oftentimes, we see with macOS, you have your time machine, which is an exact image of your computer that you can then load onto another Mac. Windows, you can do a clone. There's a couple of softwares out there like Macrium Reflect that'll clone your disk and be an exact image that you can then put into a new computer. You cannot do that though from one operating system to a different operating system. So if you're going from Windows to Windows or from Mac to Mac, you can keep your things like your settings and your programs all together. If you're going from a Mac to a Windows machine or from Windows to Linux, you won't be able to keep your settings in your programs. You will be able to back up your documents, such as Microsoft. If you use Microsoft Word, you can download your Word documents, move them to the new computer, but then you'll have to install Word on the new computer in order to open and edit them. So there's really kind of two main ways to transfer your information to a new computer. The cloning method will work if you're going from one operating system to the same operating system. And if you're making a jump from an operating system to either a version of that operating system that's incompatible with the programs you're running, or to a different operating system, then you'll have to reinstall the programs that you have, but you can carry over things like your documents and your photos. So going over to something like Linux or switching from Mac to PC, things like that do take more setup and more time to get everything back to the way you want it. With your question about Ubuntu, I think you're just using the live version of Ubuntu's USB and not fully installing it onto the computer. In a situation like that, if you stop by with your computer sometime, and the flash drive that you have, we can take a quick look at it and either and determine exactly what's going on and either help you do it or yeah.
Sometimes, but they will put a little bit of confusion to learn how to really pay it.
Yeah. Oftentimes, once you have the flash drive that you want, you'll have to boot to that flash drive. Each computer is going to be different, so it might be best to Google it. But on average, it's a button that you press, like F12 is a very common one, or there's another way to get to it through the operating system, such as holding down Shift when you restart from the login screen on a Windows machine. Will give you the option to boot from a USB. So there are different ways of getting to that USB, but once you're there, you'll then also have to follow the instructions on how to install the operating system you're trying to install. But it sounds like you might just be doing the live version where it never installs. So at some point, just bring your computer and the flash drive by and we can help you with that. Yeah.
When you're talking about backing things up and things like I'm a photographer, so I have like
Yeah.
thousands of photos on my thing, on my hard drive. So if I'm moving to Windows 11, you're saying basically I have to download all that stuff before like back it up. Will I be able to plug a drive that I've been using on Windows 10 into Windows 11 and still like pull my photos and process it still gonna work, or then
Yeah,
gonna
that won't change at all.
Yeah, I guess.
And if you're doing an in-place upgrade, so if you're upgrading your from Windows 10 to 11 and you're not doing a fresh new installation, it'll be like the clone. It'll keep everything exactly as it is.
Okay.
Your programs, your settings. The only exception is if you're running a program on Windows 10 that's not compatible with Windows 11, that won't, it'll carry all the files over, but it just won't run. So if you're upgrading your computer to Windows 10, from Windows 10 to Windows 11, then it'll just work.
Okay.
Now, the exception to that is if you're running, so if we go all the way back here, to the requirements for going to Windows 11. Oh, I went too far. So, for example, it has to be in a UEFI partition. So in order to run UEFI, you have to have global partition GPT, I forget what the T stands for, versus master boot record, which is MBR. So we used to use MBR, and that is now considered legacy. You now need to use GPT to use UEFI. If your computer is using MBR, you have to convert it to GPT. And oftentimes, in order to convert that, you have to wipe the computer because you're replacing the partition scheme. So if you have a really old computer that you have upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and now you're upgrading it to Windows 11, if you have any situation like that, you likely, in order to meet the requirements for Windows 11, you likely will need to kind of start over when it comes to re-downloading your programs and resetting up your settings. If you have a newer computer, let's say you bought it when Windows 10 was out, then you're probably perfectly fine. Windows 8 kind of cuts the middle, so it's a coin toss there. But if you have a really old computer that you've had for a long time, it used to have, let's say, Windows 7 or possibly Windows 8 on it, and you've upgraded it and you're looking to upgrade it again, there's a good likelihood that you won't be able to keep all of your data intact, programs wise. You'll still be able to back up your files and photos and things like that, but you'll have to reinstall your programs and settings. So it depends, but if it's a newer computer or if you bought it when Windows 10 was out, shouldn't be an issue going to Windows 11. 5 years old would be fine.
It wasn't Windows.
No, if it was 5 or 6 years old, then it won't be an issue. Any other questions?
I just have a generic question.
Yeah.
So I have a laptop that I do all my emails and stuff on. But they said to have a separate computer just for banking. So what would you recommend for that? Like a pad, would that work for banking?
If you're like online banking,
Yeah, so if I don't do online because I don't have another computer.
it's if your current computer doesn't have the requirements to go online, or if you're using it.
It does.
Okay.
It's a fairly new.
It is.
Yeah.
So if you just want to completely separate your online banking from your personal machine that you might get a virus or something on, you just need something that can access the internet, basically. So the device that you're using doesn't matter all that much, as long as, like, if you get a tablet and you don't like navigating touchscreen, then that's probably a bad option, right? So if you're thinking about getting like a small tablet, but you really like using a trackpad or a mouse and keyboard type situation, you might not want to get a tablet. The key is that you have a device that has security updates. Most tablets will have a minimum of 5, and the higher end, or 3 to 5, depending on how low end you go. And the majority of high-end tablets, like an iPad or the high-end Samsung tablets, will have that 8 to 10 years of support. And within that support, it's getting security updates. When they launch a device, they'll announce how long the software support is guaranteed for. So when you buy the device, you just have to make sure that it still is getting the latest software updates. And that's going to go for laptops as well. So you don't have to, if all you're doing is going onto the internet, it's perfectly fine to get something as simple as a Chromebook, which is going to be, it's not really going to be a full computer, but if all you're doing is accessing the internet, there's no issue with it. If you try to put a program on it, or if you're thinking like having a desktop type experience, Chromebook's not going to be the answer. But if you're just accessing the internet for online banking, something as simple as a Chromebook is perfectly fine. The lower end ones are going to be just slightly laggy. But the higher end ones, and by higher end, I don't mean, you're looking closer in like the $300 to $400 range for like the higher end Chromebook type scenario, or you can get a lower end Chromebook. Something like that would be perfectly fine. You can get a full blown computer if you want. But if you're only accessing the internet, you don't need that. What you just need to make sure is you have a computer that's getting software updates, and they will announce how long those updates will be for when they launch the computer. If you're using an older computer, like an older Chromebook, and it's not on the latest version of Chrome OS, Google's Chrome OS, then I wouldn't use that, because it's not up to date. It's not getting security updates. So that's what really matters when you're looking for a device.
So is that what you would also recommend for if my laptop's kind of big, so I'm looking for something to travel with?
If you're
the same phone.
So Chromebooks work
really.
really well. They're just computers that run Chrome OS, which is a very lightweight operating system. that uses Google's services, one of which is Google Chrome. So the Chromebook works really well if everything you're doing is web-based, is online. If you're looking to do anything where you download photos to the computer, it's not going to be the best experience. If you're looking to download programs and run a program, it's probably not going to be compatible. And if you can get it off of like the Play Store, Google Play Store, it's not going to be the best experience. So they're very lightweight computers in terms of power. So they usually have pretty good battery life at a small size without needing very powerful hardware, because they're entirely based around accessing the internet. So the features that it basically by default is going to have is Google Chrome, Google Calendar, Google Docs, everything web-based. So if you just need a device that accesses the internet or internet-based services like mobile banking or Google Docs or your email, it's a perfectly good option. Just know that it's going to have limitations over a laptop or in that regard. It's going to behave more like a tablet in what you can do on it.
No, and the same thing with phones and tablets and things like that, that we already have, and everybody's not upgrading all their phones and tablets. Can you still plug those into Windows 11 and still download your documents and things like, or, I mean, I have OneDrive on my tablet, but I don't.
So as long as the device that you're plugging in supports that, then Windows 11 will be able to access it perfectly fine. An example would be an iPad. You're not going to be able to just access the iPad. You have to use the program iTunes or a different program that's made to access.
Like I plug my phone in now and it comes up and says, here are all your files, and like all I have to do is like drag and drop files.
If that's what's happening on Windows 10, it'll be the same way on Windows 11, because that has more to do with what the device that you're plugging in supports, less to do with what your computer supports. It really comes down to if your device allows access to all of your files or not. Apple locks that down more, and you have to use a program like iTunes to download your photos, for example. Android devices are usually more open about that. As long as you have the password for the device, they usually let you in, and you can just see all the files and folders. So yeah. Any other questions?
Why did they think this was a good idea?
Windows 10 was supposed to be the last, when they first launched it, I don't know if anyone remembers this, they said it would be the last Windows operating system, and that they would just upgrade Windows 10 when they wanted to add a new feature. And I guess, 10 years later, they changed their mind. So, yeah, it was supposed to be the last one, but that clearly didn't happen. Yeah. Change in direction.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you ever do have any questions, you can always stop by. We're at the computer clinic. Simple questions we're always happy to answer, or you can always send us an email.